Morning. Thank you for coming today. I'm really delighted and pleased that to see all of you today. Yeah, sorry about the sun. We may have to start handing out hats to people sitting in that particular location. Anyway, feel welcome to move about the cabin. Yeah. But in any case, I'm super glad that you came today. And I had, and really what was one of the things that was delaying is I was talking to someone out in the lobby about what was going on in this room versus what was going on downstairs. So I had a moment where I got to be like an usher and explain to people what our schedule is and what we do, which is, it's always fun for me to do that. You know, it's like, I remember what it was like to be new, and it's a good feeling to meet new people. And I'm guessing that we'll have some new people for the next few weeks because we had our booth at ComFest last weekend, and we got to meet a lot of new folks. And a couple of people came in today, and they were kind of amazed that someone had dropped a Buddhist temple in the middle of downtown. But I think, you know, people have been saying that for like ever since we moved to this property in 1990, and we put together this beautiful temple display. People have been sort of marveling how this happened, and it was through the work of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, the founder of our center, who has now passed away. He lived to the age of 95, and he was in the United States for about 40 plus years. Doing Dharma and putting together the situation that we now enjoy. So I just want to thank you, you know, for being here and bringing your goodness to this space. So today I wanted to talk about how do we know if our Dharma practice is working or not, and because a lot of people have that curiosity. They're wondering, well, you know, I've been meditating for a certain number of months, or I've been meditating for a certain number of years, and how do I know if it's working? Of course, you know, that what they say in the car commercials is true. Your mileage may vary depending on lots of different factors, but the fact of the matter is that, oh, that's right, I owe this gentleman an email. Sorry about that. I'll talk with you later. I owe you an email, sorry. He wrote me this week, and it's like, oh, no. In any case, I think that what we bring here is goodness, and it's a testament to Khenpo Rinpoche's investment in us. He believed in us, and we created this place to help other people connect to Dharma and to connect to themselves. So anyway, but the topic today, before I get to the topic today, which is how do we know if our Dharma practice is working, before I get to that, we probably should begin with a statement of intention. And for us, that's the refuge prayer, which we can recite 2 times in English, and then we'll give it our best chance to chant it in Tibetan 1 time through. It begins with the words in the Buddha. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Now we'll try the Tibetan. O Sanjay Chudan Soji Chonam La Changchu Pardu Tani Kyap Suchi Daji Chinso Jibe Sunam Ki Trola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho. Okay, thanks everyone. I'll recite a short prayer and then we'll begin. O palden sawe lamha rinpoche tagi chiwar pede den shala kadrin jembo gone je sunte kusum tugging udrup sal du so. Okay, thank you. The topic today, I took the topic from a quotation that was sent to me and shared with me this week by one of our Dharma friends in Iowa. She and I talk frequently about what it is to be a practitioner of Dharma and how it is that we develop qualities and learning from our meditation practice. And she sent me this, and so if you're watching, thank you, because you gave me my Dharma talk for this week. And this is a quotation from one of the Nyingma masters, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, who many of us know from studying his books or from meeting one of his amazing sons, Chökyi Nyima Rinpoche, and then also Minkyu Rinpoche and Tsoknyi Rinpoche. He has three amazing sons who are Dharma teachers also. So we may know them and know him through their work. But here's what he says. He said, the true sign of practice is that you are naturally and effortlessly without fixation. Also, that you are endowed with devotion, compassion, and pure perception, just like the sky is filled with the warmth of sunlight. So I named the talk the sunlit blue sky of pure perception. It's a fancy title, sounds like a poem, but it also sounds a little on the, shall we say, unattainable side. And part of the reason that I wanted to read the quotation first is I'm going to read it again at the end and see if it means a little bit more to us after we've had a chance to chat about it. Let's see. Because I know people look at images of the Buddha, and the Buddha is sitting in meditation, looks very perfect, looks very, peaceful, very perfect, and then they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, that is not my experience of the world at all. They think, well, I have so many problems in my everyday life, and I have this problem and I have that problem, and I have this friend and I have this person who doesn't like me, and I have all of these things going on in my life. I don't feel like a serene, enlightened being sitting on a lotus flower. It's just not real for me. And so I think that dichotomy can make us feel bad. I don't know about you. Sometimes when I compare myself to other people, I feel decent, but sometimes I don't feel good about myself when I compare myself to other people. I always think, oh, those people have it all together. Those people know everything, they have it all together, they've got their lives sorted out. But a friend of mine, one of my other Dharma friends a couple weeks ago, she said, well, I'm sorry to say, I am messy. That's how she described herself. She said, I'm messy. And what was so interesting is that she was like the third person who said to me in 1 week that they were messy. And I kind of felt, ooh, there's a theme developing here. But then I really started thinking it over, and it's like we're all kind of messy. Let's face it. We look in the mirror and we see something we don't like, and then we kind of get fixated on it. And so this is why we need Dharma. This is why we need spiritual life, in order to find a way through the messiness, a way to make the messiness make sense, and a way to make the messiness come to something good. How to turn what one teacher called the manure of experience into the flowers of Bodhi. And I think that is really what our practice is all about. Because if we look at the three things that Tulku Urgyen describes here as being the qualities of a being who has developed their meditation, we'll find that they may sound like they're rarefied and far away and we could never possibly reach them, but the truth is we've actually already made some progress. We've already made some progress. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in the next section, is that we may think it's far away, but it's not, because, number one, if we take to heart the teaching that we all have Buddha nature, that's really where it starts. Now, not every person who studies about Buddhist teachings knows about Buddha nature, but I'll just give a brief description. It's in class 5, by the way. It's class 5 in the Intro to Buddhism class. It's called Buddha Nature. You can go to it on the first Sunday of every even-numbered month. Which one are we in now? Oh, we're in 7, so we're in classes 1 through 4 now. But anyway, it's class 5, where it's discussed in a little more detail. But the bottom line is we have a mind, and that mind can know things. Not news, that part's not news. We can know things. Some of us get paid for knowing things. Some of us get paid for the skills we develop. Some of us, some of us have so much skill and so many things that our mind can do. But the mind can also know itself. The mind can also know itself. And this is really the work of the Buddhist teaching, is coming to know our mind. And when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told us about it the first time here in Columbus, it was in a talk, and I think the talk may have been in somebody's living room before we even had a separate center. We were in people's living rooms for years. And I think it was in somebody's living room in the North End when he said, if you only knew who you really were and what you were capable of, he said, you'd be astonished and amazed. And I really was intrigued by that statement. If you only knew who you really were and what you were capable of, you would be astonished and amazed. And I came away from that talk a little uncertain, like, was he talking to everybody else but not me? But then I said, oh no, he was talking to me. He's talking to all of us. Oh my gosh, what a responsibility. That was my sort of habitual response to finding out that I had a gift of some kind, was like, oh no, now I gotta do something with it. But as I've reflected on that statement, if we only knew who we really were, and I think that what the Buddha's teaching is that we all have a mind that is not established as a material thing. In fact, there are meditations or contemplations that you can do where you contemplate your mind and think about, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Does it have a location? Does it have a beginning? Does it have an end? And through this contemplation, you kind of come to the understanding, mind is not a material thing, but it's not nothing. Neither is it nothing. It's not nothing because it knows and it experiences things, and it can know and experience itself. Now, most of us don't know what that feels like, but we've gotten close to it many times when we do our quiet sitting meditation, shamatha. The quiet sitting meditation practice, shamatha, or if you call it tranquility meditation, that quiet sitting meditation is our first introduction to the fact that there might be more to us than all the thoughts we have. Yada, 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 yada. I love the way Mingyur Rinpoche, he says, I like the way he talks about it. He says it's blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And he says we're more than that. And I understand what he's getting to, because I remember sitting in meditation, and the object of meditation is to place your attention on an object and then return your attention to the object when it wanders away. It's kind of simple, but kind of difficult, And so you're sitting there and you're placing your attention on the breath. It's coming in, it's going out. and a thought comes by. And sometimes you just watch it and it goes by, but sometimes it circles back and grabs you, or rather you grab it, because it fascinates you for just a minute. And then you're like, oh yeah, what about that? And then the next thing you know, you're 2 minutes into a rabbit hole of some kind, right? You know, like a problem you had yesterday or something you're worried about or something. But then you take hold of the technique which teaches you that when you notice that you're no longer with your object, when you're no longer with the object of your attention, you're no longer with it, you're to label the situation as being thinking, no matter what it is you're doing. If you're thinking, emoting, feeling, it's still thinking, and you let it go, and then you consciously and gently return your attention to the breath for a fresh start. And think of it as a fresh start. So what happened to that thought when you dropped it? Okay? That was my first introduction to the possibility there was more to my mind than the yada, 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 blah, blah, blah of everyday thought. Because there was a quiet moment. When one thought has ended before the next one begins, there's a gap. And in that gap, you don't like lose consciousness or become a zombie. You know, you don't do any of those things. You're still aware. And that awareness gave me a clue that there was more to discover about myself. There was more to me than met the eye. And that was when I started having confidence in what Rinpoche said. If you only knew who you really were and what you were capable of, you'd be astonished and amazed. So, shamatha meditation is how we gradually accomplish a mind that can be even with whatever is going on. No matter what's going on, you can be even with it. We can be even with it if we find the right way to engage it. Instead of grabbing hold of something and then going down a habitual emotional drain with it, if we look at it, that's what the way Mingyur Rinpoche teaches it. He says, if you have a thought, just look, turn your attention to the thought. Not that you're going to think that thought, or is it let that thought think you? I don't know. Anyway, so it's not that you're going to think the thought and go wherever it leads you, but you're just going to turn your attention to it as though it were any other object of attention. And sometimes when you do that, it disappears. Surprise. So this gives us an idea of what it's like to have our minds a little more calm, a little more unfixated. And what we then begin to notice is that when we're not meditating, I don't know if anybody has experienced this, you notice your thoughts when you're meditating, right? But sometimes you notice your thoughts when you're not meditating, and that is, for a lot of people, a big surprise. Like, oh, I actually am thinking things. Because previously, we never observed our thoughts. We were always the star of the show. We were the main character in the novel of our life. But if we could step outside of that for just a second and look at it as though it were from the outside, we can see that it's really just a moment in time, and it can disappear. And in disappearing, it can be okay. It can be okay. The mind is fine without things in it. The mind is not, you're not going to lose your mind. You know, you're not going to go crazy. You're having a moment without thought. And this is, you know, some people think, well, that's the point. I have to chase away all my thoughts. Oh my gosh, let's go get a broom. Let's chase them all away. But that's not the point. The point is to remain with the object and to return your attention to the breath in a gentle, loving way over and over and over again so that you can become a friend to yourself. And as you become a friend to yourself, you start judging yourself a little bit less. Not a lot less maybe, but a little bit less, because you can see how human you are. Pema Chodron in one of her books says, if you're having a problem with someone, just use this word in your mind to describe them. They're adorable. They're adorable. Their foibles, their faults, oh, they're just adorable. And we can say that about ourselves too. Aren't I adorable? I think I'm in control of this situation. Aren't I funny? I think I can control this, ha. So I mean, if we can start to think about ourselves in a kinder way, that in itself is progress. So what some people tell me as their first sign of progress in their meditation is that they feel less judgmental about others and they feel less judgmental about themselves. And they're more able to be with themselves without judgment. That's progress. So we may not be, naturally and effortlessly without fixation. Well, okay, that's going to take some time. But if at the very least we can be more patient with ourselves and less judgmental with ourselves and with others, even if we still have people who get on our last raw nerve and that we always have problems with, okay, right? That we still have made progress in a positive direction. So that's the first thing that we can notice. And eventually, as we deepen our meditation practice and learn more about meditation and shift from shamatha or tranquility meditation to vipassana, which is insight meditation, when we shift from the shamatha to a more vipassana approach, looking at the mind and meditating with the mind, which is something that we do here in the practice that's called Mahamudra. Mahamudra meditation is aimed at, it's a special form of shamatha and a special form of vipassana, which is aimed toward understanding this basic nature of mind. Then the whole idea of Buddha nature will become less of an idea and more of a reality for how we experience ourselves. We'll begin to see that we could become more uplifted than we are now. But that's not everything. Our meditation can also lead us into more love and compassion. First, we're more compassionate with ourselves, maybe, or maybe we're more compassionate with others and then drag ourselves along for more compassion. But whatever it is, that we begin to feel like we understand ourselves better and we see our foibles better, and if we are adorable, then we can start thinking that other people's foibles are, you may not want them to keep doing the thing they're doing, and you may have to have a conversation with them about that. But at least you won't be working on disliking them actively in your mind. So that's, to me, the beginning of empathy. Empathy is understanding that other people are where you're at. They've been where you are. Or maybe they are where you were. Maybe in a way, they're you at a different time in your life. And you can begin to have empathy for their suffering. And that leads us to the second style of meditation that you learn in the Tibetan tradition here, and that is compassion meditation. Whatever form of compassion meditation you begin with, the easiest is the metta or loving kindness meditation, where you sit on your seat and as you breathe out, you mentally extend love and kindness, first to yourself, then to others you're close to, then to others you're distant from, and finally, the nameless, faceless, every person. And by doing this type of imagination meditation, where you just imagine that you have enough love to fill the whole world, and you start with yourself, sending love and kindness to yourself, sending love and kindness to those close to you, and then going outward to eventually include everyone. This way you get to include people that you're having problems with in a way that is safe, shall we say. It's a safe way to approach difficult people in our lives. So this compassion, our teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, said, even just harboring the wish to be of benefit to other beings, even if you can't accomplish that benefit because you don't have the skill or the talent, because, we're never going to make everybody happy. It's not going to happen. But even if all we do is think about them with a kind of sincere, wish that maybe they could be happy someday in some way, that is the beginning, he said. He called it a momentum of goodness. It starts a little momentum of goodness in your mind that eventually becomes self-sustaining. Now, we may not be endowed with compassion, meaning that it's naturally always there. But it does increase, and people who have been practicing this for some time tell me that their own capacity for compassion for themselves and others increases as they do this compassion meditation. The easiest one is this metta practice. The Tibetan tradition also has a more complicated form called tonglen, or sending and receiving, which those of you who've read Pema Chodron's books, you've heard about. But we teach that as well. But the easiest way to do it is just to mentally send love to yourself and all beings. And then that opens the possibility of connecting with people in a genuine way. Because right now we have to connect with people through the filter of our own confusion. We have ideas about who we think we are. And sometimes those ideas of who we think we are clashes with other people's ideas of who they think they are, and that clash brings about conflict. And there are conflicts that need mediation, and there are conflicts that need to be worked out somehow. Not all conflicts can be resolved, but those that can, it's kind of good to try. So this true connection that we seek in life, I think, comes from using our imagination first to imagine that we extend love and compassion to everyone. And then gradually we'll be able to do that in real life and have a more genuine connection. What is the devotion that Toku Urgyen Rinpoche talks about? This has to do with the process of uncovering our Buddha nature. It is a process because we don't know at first that we have it, and we're not 100% sure that we have it. So how does our Buddha nature become uncovered? Through interaction with Dharma friends or teachers. When we interact with our various types of teachers, whether they are the branch teachers. I loved Bardo Toku Rinpoche's description of how you find a Buddhist teacher. He said, somebody asked him, how do you find your Buddhist teacher? He said, well, first of all, do your meditation practice. He said, when you do your meditation practice, he said, the karma in your continuum will ripen, and as it ripens, you'll come into contact with lots of teachers. And those teachers, some of them, their advice will help you. And he said, these are your branch teachers. And then he said, from among these branch teachers, you'll find one or two whose advice helps your mind the most. And he said, those will become your root teachers. So I love the idea of thinking about a tree, this living, vibrant thing, which is the connection to our Buddha nature, is like a branch and its roots. And this is how all of the great masters of our tradition, who are depicted in the statuary behind here, because the center figure is Vajradhara, which is the nature of your mind. It's your Buddha nature personified as a statue. It was said to be the form in which the Buddha Shakyamuni appeared to the great Indian saint Tilopa, who's depicted on my left, my right, your left, at the top of the center set of 6 cabinets on either side of Vajradhara. He appeared to him and gave him the essential nectar-like instructions of how to meditate on the nature of mind. How. He taught him the how in a visionary teaching. And then Tilopa used those teachings, gave them to his student Naropa. Naropa had the same realization. Naropa gave them to the Tibetan Marpa, and he had the same realization. And then he gave it to his student Milarepa, and he had the realization, and he gave it to Gampopa, and Gampopa gave it to the Dusum Khenpa, the first Karmapa. And that's how this lineage comes to us in modern day. From 1,000 years ago, the vision of this Buddha granted the teaching to Tilopa, and it was through the relationship between the teacher and the student that the essential instructions are imparted. And so for that, one needs devotion. Problem is, here in this part of the world, devotion can sometimes be a dirty word because it implies wrong-headed devotion, to a being or a cause or something like that, where you are unthinking and you don't have your own mind about things and that you just follow someone without question. But that's not really what devotion is. Devotion is recognizing the source of the teaching and respecting it, because that's what the Tibetan word for devotion means. Mugu is one of the words for devotion, and it's like enthusiastic respect. So the way Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche explained it, he said, respect is what we feel when we realize that all the masters of the past have really accomplished Buddhahood, and we respect that, and we want to learn that. And enthusiasm is our enthusiasm in practicing what they practiced. And so that's really what devotion is. Devotion is not the unthinking devotion to a cause or a person or something. It's the acknowledgement of the value of lineage and transmission in the imparting of essential instructions that will give us access to the nature of our mind. There are lots of ways to become a Buddha. You can do it on your own, which is how Talopa did it, but then you can do it with the help of a teacher. So we've got a couple different ways to go about it. And devotion doesn't mean that you don't see people's faults. It means that I'm going to make a joke now. This is what in comedy they call a callback. You think of them as being adorable. Okay, but if somebody is doing something wrong, yeah, that you have to really think about. And you have to make a decision about whether you're going to continue to associate with the person who you feel is doing wrong. And everybody has to come to that at some point. So this is, I think, part of the reason why devotion is so difficult for us to understand here, because we've seen so much wrong-headed devotion turn so wrong. But in the right situation with the right people, it can go very well. I look at Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche as the example, because he was the straightest of straight arrows. He was a completely pure monk who at the same time had bodhisattva intentions and the deep practice of Mahamudra. So he was like everything in one. That's the kind of person I wish for all of us to have as a teacher. So that's that part. But pure perception, what is that? Pure perception, we train in pure perception here and in devotion through the various devotional practices of our tradition. Pure perception is the easiest of these to explain. If you've ever heard of mantra practice, like the compassion mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, when you learn the compassion practice, you also learn a visualization meditation, where you, for just a moment, set aside the idea of who you think you are and imagine that you have a body that's made of light and is empty inside and embodies perfection. We play make-believe for a minute, and we use our imagination to imagine what it's like to be a Buddha. And that is what pure perception is entertaining that idea briefly in the safe space of your meditation seat, acting as if you're already awakened and already present with that. So this type of meditation is how pure perception begins. If we do the Chenrezig practice, there's a point in the practice where we imagine that Chenrezi's above our head and we've prayed to him and asked for his blessing. The Bodhisattva of compassion then shines beautiful light upon us and upon all the beings in the universe. Nobody's left out. Even the people we don't like and have problems with, they're included. And we are transformed into Chenrezig. All of our faults, failings, and problems disappear. And we have the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. And then everybody in the universe has it as well. And for that short period of time, we practice pure perception. Now, if we really look deeply into it, we'll know that that's the nature of everybody's mind as Buddha. But because we're all so confused, we don't live there. We just visit through the practice of pure perception and the practice of mantra. So, interestingly enough, it is said that over time, the practice of pure perception can lead to, surprise, happiness. All of these practices can lead to happiness. However we define that. the practice of shamatha, that helps us to be without fixation on things, because we let go of all those thoughts. We don't hold on to them. With compassion, we practice compassion through metta and other types of imagination meditations. And we practice devotion and pure perception and make that connection through the practice of guru yoga, which I did not talk about. But we also do it through the practice of mantra and visualization, because we're encouraged to see the Buddha or Bodhisattva of the practice as being our teacher, inseparable. So it's like that. So now I'm going to read the quotation again. And then we can have a discussion, right, about what you think about all these ideas. You know, because we may not notice that we have changes in ourselves from our Dharma practice. And in fact, I was talking to someone earlier about the story that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche talks about that. He said, you know, you guys over here in the US, he said, you really judge your practice a lot. And he said, and you're always wondering, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? He said, but you guys, he said, don't be like the impatient farmer. And we're like, what? Impatient farmer. It turns out it's like a joke. It's a Tibetan joke. And because they were agrarian people, it had to be a farmer. He said, you know, he said there was a farmer and he was really, really impatient. How impatient was he? He was so impatient that he planted his seeds, tamped the dirt over them, watered them, waited a little while, like maybe not even a full day, and he said, and then he dug them back up to see if they'd grown any. He said, don't be like that. He said, it's better if you look back over days, weeks, months, and years to really see your progress. You may not see the progress from one day to the next, but you will see progress over a period of days, weeks, months, and years. So what I always tell people who say to me, I don't know if my practice is working, I say to them, well, think about how you were 5 years ago and how you would respond to this happening in your life or that happening in your life 5 years ago. And many people will say, oh, I see what you're talking about. I'm a different person now than I was 5 years ago, and I'm 5 years farther down the path. I get it now. So even though we may not look inside ourselves and see Buddha nature, but we may not see the nature of our mind when we look at ourselves in the mirror. But if we practice these three things, shamatha, compassion meditation, and mantra meditation, over time, those changes will show in our experience. So that's it. Now we're going to hear what Toku, see if we're getting a little closer now. So he says, the true sign of practice is that you are naturally and effortlessly without fixation. Also, that you are endowed with devotion, compassion, and pure perception, just like the sky is filled with the warmth of sunlight. I just love that, because it's something we all have the capacity for. So anyway, I think I better stop here. But questions, comments, we have the question microphones, and you can, yeah, go for it, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I am wondering, this is a question that I struggle with over years, and I always like to hear what people say about it. Mm-hmm. But can you talk a little bit about the difference between your brain and your mind?
Okay. I'll tell you what, I'm going to start by saying I am in no way an expert on this, but my teacher has talked about it a few times. So I can repeat what there's a book called Words of My Perfect Teacher, and I think about that every time somebody asks me a question that Rinpoche's been asked, because I go, words of my perfect teacher, I can just repeat them. So this is not something I know personally, but here's what Tronghu Rinpoche said, and then I'll tell you what Khenpo Rinpoche said. Tronghu Rinpoche said that, yes, he said in some countries, in some parts of the world, he said, people think your mind is located in your brain, And some people think your mind, in other cultures, they think your mind is in your heart. And he said they're both wrong. Because he said even a corpse has a brain, even a corpse has a heart, but it doesn't have a mind. So that means, and that takes me to Khenpo Rinpoche's comment, which was that the brain is a support. The brain is a support for the mind. But, those of you, I'm going to say hi to Michael Earlywine. Your Facebook post on this week really helped me, because he was talking recently about having had a stroke. And it was through that experience that he realized that the presence of his mind, his awareness, was independent of the brain. And that fascinates me, because that makes true what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, was that his opinion was even people with brain disorders such as dementia, if they are seasoned meditators, they will still experience the effects, but not in the same way. Because when you are able to rest your mind in the present moment of its own awareness, that moment only lasts a few seconds, but it gives us a glimpse. And that's what this gentleman online said. Through his own experience, he realized that his awareness was different than his brain, which is really interesting, okay? So I wish I could say more about it, because all I can do is just, oh my gosh, it's like those people on TV. I'm just asking the questions, but the idea is that if I can repeat these little things, it might give us a window into finding out more. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and you had a question, and then we'll come back to you, okay? Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
So you discussed how do you know you're making progress. I guess, how do you know, or how do you come back from backsliding or setback? I'll give you an example. So this weekend, 4th of July was like my second favorite holiday. Sure. I had a really hard time this 4th of July celebration, right?
Yeah.
And found myself yesterday experiencing HALT, all of them, hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Right.
I could take care of hungry. Last night, I took care of tired. I'm not sure I've solved the other two. I was very glad to be able to come today in sitting meditation, and that's helpful. I guess besides just keep going, keep doing it, do you have any other thoughts on, I just feel like I'm losing ground because of where my headspace has been?
I do understand this. I think that in a way you're speaking for many of us who have had difficult times these last months. We've had a difficult time because we're not seeing what we want to see in the world. We're not seeing kindness, we're not seeing goodness, we're not seeing fairness. So there's a lot of things we're seeing that, that we would like to see and aren't there. I think that when you talk about backsliding, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. Do you mean that the backsliding is that you're losing confidence in practice, or do you mean backsliding in the way that you're not able to practice? Could I ask about that?
I guess I'm feeling more judgmental and impatient, and it's
I
more
see.
the real world
I get it.
expression.
Right, exactly. And how do you kind of get that restarted?
Yes.
Okay. I asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche one time, I said, well, look, I haven't been able to do much practice lately. I feel like, things aren't going well. And I said, do you have a tip or a trick for restarting a stalled practice? And he said, no tip, no trick, you just start. And so what I think is, I think about the next moment in meditation when we have had a thought. Okay, so we're sitting in meditation, we have that thought. At first it distracts us. We get hold of it, we label it thinking, we drop it, and we return to the breath for a fresh start. And I think that's why he said that, because it truly is that easy. Now, the habitual thoughts of negativity and so forth, they're habitual, so they're going to be stronger and harder to deal with. So what we might have to do is we might have to take some equal but opposite thoughts and put them into the system. One of the things, I had a friend tell me one time, he says, I'm starting to have doubts that I have Buddha nature. And I said, well, maybe we can rely on the masters of the past to help. I said, will you please get your copy of the book? I said, do you have a copy of the book, The Way of the Bodhisattva? Shantideva, 8th century, he wrote this 10-chapter poem on bodhicitta, the heart of awakening. And he said, yeah. I said, read chapters 1 and 2 and 3 out loud. And do it, you can do 1 chapter one day, 2 chapter, and then 3rd chapter, and the 10th chapter. 1, 2, 3, and 10. Read them out loud to yourself and see what happens. He said in 2 weeks he began to feel better. And I think the reason is that Shantideva speaks so powerfully about the supremacy and the transformational power of bodhicitta in those opening ones, those opening chapters. And then in the 10th chapter, he talks about the fruition of kindness and love as being a transformed world where even the most wretched beings are free. And I think that sometimes if we put some opposite thoughts in the system, that they may help to balance us out a little bit. We're not trying to be numb. We're not trying to be unfeeling. We're trying to balance out with one type of thinking with another type of thinking. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And also to have some compassion for ourselves. And so I tell people, just recite these aspirations in English and see if they help. If they don't, well, let's keep talking.
Okay.
Because I think that helped me a lot too when I was feeling kind of unhappy about it. And I think aspirations are incredibly powerful. Also, if you have a statue of the Buddha on your altar, especially if it's got relics in it and mantras and things, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told me, he said that when you have such an image in front of you, he said it is as though you are making that aspiration in front of the Buddha personally. So you can, he said, get yourself in that kind of mind space and then aspire that you find a way through the problem that you're having. Not that you're looking for a specific solution. You see what I'm saying? Because we don't know, right? So we have to kind of be in the don't know position sometimes. So, and then just basically make that aspiration. And then let's just keep talking, because if you try these things and they're not successful, well, let's just keep talking and finding other ways, because there's so many types of practice that we can do in this situation.
Okay, thank you.
Those are some easy places to start.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'll pray for you too, right? Yeah, yes.
Hi, Lama Kathy.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your informative and helpful teaching.
Okay,
I have a question that I actually never thought about. It's about compassion meditation.
Oh, sure.
So if there is a relative who's passed, who, I had a difficult relationship with, am I able to include that person in the compassion meditation?
Yeah, this was actually asked to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, and he said absolutely, because regardless of where they are somewhere.
Yes.
And he said when you send love and compassion to them, he said it's not like you put a letter in the mail and you don't know whether it's going to get there.
Right.
He said because of your connection, because of your karmic connection with them, they will benefit from your practice no matter where they are.
Good.
Which is kind of hard for us to kind of think about, except that most of us have had the experience of having somebody call us
Yes.
and say, hi, how are you? I was just thinking about you, and how you doing? And we've all had that experience, and it was like, oh, I'm so glad you called, and so on and so forth, And so I think that we are connected in ways that we're connected, in ways that we don't even know.
Right.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, no, thanks. Yeah. Hi.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for your teaching this morning.
Yeah, thanks.
Your sharing of the thing that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, with the impatient farmer, was that
The impatient farmer, yeah.
That was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche?
Yes, yeah.
That immediately sparked about 5 things in my memory because I'm, you know, there are many times I feel like I've made no progress whatsoever and so forth. And so that metaphor is extremely helpful. So the first thing it reminded me of was a few weeks ago, my wife and I visited a home where we had lived for, in her case, about 15 years, my case, about 7 years. And for reasons I don't know, both my wife and I love planting things, trees,
Oh, yeah.
gardens. We're obsessive about planting things. So at this house that I hadn't really seen this in probably more than a decade. So we walked through kind of a little alleyway where we could see this backyard. And we hadn't seen it in a long time, and it took our breath away to see these trees that we had planted from seed, and now they were enormous. And if you would have asked me, it's like, nothing, they probably cut them all down, they probably, but they were big, beautiful,
Wow.
Enormous oak trees, persimmon trees. The other thing that it reminded me of, talking about an impatient farmer, is I have been planting a strain of beans that my family has been planting for about 175 years. Wow. I'm the last one to be planting them. I'm trying to give these away to somebody so that they can continue.
So keep going.
But in this case, it gave me a good metaphor in that if I don't gather those seed every autumn, put them in a jar, stick them in the refrigerator, and in the spring, plant them again, they're gone. So the answer is, it's okay to start over all the time. I start over every year with those beans. And
I like that.
They've been going since they came from West Africa, God knows how many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
So, sometimes we don't see our progress, but that metaphor is extremely helpful. So thank you so much for that. That really, that helps me. Yeah. Because just keep planting.
I really appreciate that. And if anybody wants the seeds, you can hit him up after. Yeah, he's got them to give away, I think.
Got them to give away.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And this will be the last question.
Thank you again, Lama Kathy.
Thanks.
And thank you for bringing this beautiful center to fruition and having the help of Kim Miracle and others. Could you say a couple words, please, about the Dalai Lama? Because he's going through some issues. Yeah,
I'd be happy to. Even as I was, what's so cool is when you're driving somewhere and you got NPR on, and then suddenly you hear that story with Anthony Kuhn that was on this morning, and he was being interviewed from Beijing about the complex situation with the Dalai Lama being in exile and not in Tibet, and then they're planning for his succession because for many centuries, the Dalai Lama was both the religious and the secular head of state. He was the head of the religion and also the head of state for the Tibetan people for many years, from the time of the great fifth Dalai Lama, I've forgotten whether he was in the 1400s or, no, I can't say that. The great fifth probably lived in the 17th century because he was contemporary with Karma Chakme, who was a Kagyu teacher from the 17th century, so the 1600s. So since the 1600s, the Dalai Lamas have been both the temporal and spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. And the news reporter was commenting that in honor of his 90th birthday, which was yesterday or today, depending on which calendar you're using, he announced that his successor would be reborn among the Tibetan exile community rather than being reborn in China. And this is partly because he left Tibet in 1959 because of a failed uprising against the communist government, and that then resulted in a crackdown and some killing of the religious people who were thought to be behind the uprising. And so that forced him and many others to leave the country. And they are in exile now. Now, what interested me about the news report was that there are still 7 million Tibetans living in Tibet, but there's less than 200,000 living in exile. And so these 150 to 200,000 people are trying to nurture Tibetan language and culture on behalf of everyone else. And they all revere the Dalai Lama. But the problem is that the communist government wants to appoint their own Dalai Lama after the death of the current Dalai Lama. And so it's the situation that humanity finds itself in. Humanity finds itself in wars and disputation all the time. Because we have, like I say, we have a full set of criminal tools. We have hands, mouth, feet. We can do good and we can do bad. And sometimes we choose not to do good. And so people like the Dalai Lama, who are exponents of peace in the world, we need them. And he said he's not going to give that up, because for a while he was telling people, well, maybe I won't reincarnate at all. Maybe we're done with the institution of the Dalai Lama, and maybe we're done with all that. But then yesterday he was very firm in that, no, I'll be back, but I'll be among the exiles. And he said, whatever happens, I'm always going to work for peace and justice. No matter where I am and how I am, I will be for peace and justice. And so I really feel for the situation of the Tibetan people, because it's a very difficult situation to be in, to not be able to go home. So, but I thank you for asking me about it. He is extraordinary. I got to meet him twice. In 1979, on one of his first tours to the West, he was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I got to see him there. And then in 1999, he gave an audience to the 17th Karmapa, and I was there with a group of American students who had come to support the Karmapa, who had only just escaped from the communist-held territory. So, thank you. So we have to pray that all of the exponents of peace and justice in the world keep living, and that they keep inspiring us, because we need them, I think, now more than ever. Because of time, we'll have to stop here. I always enjoy the conversation, so thank you for bringing your sort of genuineness and your goodness to this place and your meditation. Let's dedicate the goodness of this to everyone. We'll just recite the prayer of dedication of merit, the two little prayers here. We'll recite them in English, okay? Gathering together all the goodness and dedicating it to peace and justice around the world. Starting with the words, by this merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thanks, everyone. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.